Okay, so in lesson 16, we're looking at the collision detectors. We're kind of starting off with a pretty complex code, and we're pointing this out for a reason, and the reason really is, hey, this is really complex, we don't really want to do this for now. So what I mean by this is, if you read through the directions, it kind of says, or it does say, that the code below uses the sprite's X and Y positions to check whether they're touching. Essentially what they're saying is, we're checking to see if the balloon and the tack are touching. It will change the balloon sprite's animation when the tack touches it. Use the arrow keys to move the tack until it touches the balloon. So here we go, we're moving it and it pops. So we're not doing any code in this level. All this is doing is it's telling you to look at this if statement and to understand that this is actually the code written out. They want you to kind of dissect it and break it down, but I don't think that's quite necessary. Just know that this is the code that we would have used if we didn't come up with an easier function for this, and we'll talk about that in just a minute as well. But what we're noticing is essentially what this is saying is, if the X and Y position are overlapping, I guess, of the balloon and the tack, then it's going to set the animation to be popped. Okay, so that's all we need to do for this. So once you kind of take a second look at that, maybe even run the code and try it out, just go on to the next puzzle. Okay, so that's 3. Let's take a look at 6 right now. For puzzle 6, I didn't want to do the puzzle for you guys, but I did want to kind of emphasize some things that might make your lives a little bit easier, specifically copying the URL. So what you're asked to do is use a code to play a Blender sound, and then use the play sound block from the world drawer to play this sound when the apple touches the blender. You're going to need to paste the address so it looks like this. Okay, so what I want to kind of emphasize before we do this is, I think some of us are starting to have a little bit of trouble because the code is getting a little bit longer, a little bit more complex, and some of us are finding it not as quick and easy as kind of maybe the first few lessons. And I just kind of wanted to highlight maybe some steps you want to do as you're on a new puzzle, especially some of the ones with longer directions and more complex code. At least this is my process. I'm just going to call it the puzzle solving process. And you might want to look into doing the same process, or maybe you'll find something a little bit different or in a different order to be more helpful. But what I like to do first is, one, I like to just read the directions. And I know that might sound really obvious to many of us, but some of us aren't really quite doing it, and specifically we're not looking at the do this portion specifically, because this is what it tells us to do. So some of you guys might think that the objective is something else, but you're just asked to do maybe a few things that they specifically say. The next thing I like to do, right after I read the directions, I like to just run the puzzle and see what's going on. Some of them have something started for us. In this case, we have an empty code right here. It gives us the error message, line 10. But it's really helpful to just go ahead and run the puzzle or run the code just to see what you already have. Okay. After that, what I like to do is go ahead and just look at the code, kind of summarize the code in my head. So let's just say look at the code, and then we'll do that together in just a second. And then finally, after that, I do like to reread the directions. Okay, because once I kind of read the directions first, I'll know what to look for. I run the code, I look at the code, that gives me an idea of what's going on, and then it's really helpful to reread the directions again. So we already looked at the directions, which is essentially using this play sound block in the world drawer to play this sound. And so let's go ahead and maybe do that together. We're going to go ahead and do world. we're going to use the play sound block, and we're going to drop it into, I always have a hard time with these blocks. Let me try this again. Oops, sorry, we're not supposed to do that. We're actually supposed to put it here, and what we want to use is the is touching sprite. And that's why it wasn't working. So if the apple is touching the blender, then we go ahead and we're gonna play the sound. And it's not saved yet. We do have to kind of choose it. And we could search for it. They call it the blender sound, so we search blender. And we're going to notice it's not there. So what we're going to want to do actually is just copy and paste, select the URL. We're going to copy by doing Control-C or Command-C, and then we just paste it right down here, and that should work as well. I'm going to go and clear this out, and that should work. And I'm going to run it. It's going to be really loud. And there we go. Okay, so that's puzzle 6. And essentially, I really just want to highlight how we get the URL or the sound file in. Okay, we're going to look at number 8 next. And for this one, I want to just, oops, let me close this. For this one, I specifically just wanted to, I think I restarted. Let me just double check. I specifically just want to go over the console I did. The debugging console, because we're not using it as much, and I do understand why, but in some situations, specifically in this puzzle, it really is helpful. It's one of the things it asks us to do is just to change the code from debugging false to debugging true. So to do that, we literally just, right here, we just click on it and we change it to true. Okay, so I just wanted to point that out. We're going to have to add another debug code using kind of the similar format. Okay, the debug code is found here under the sprites, and what it's going to do is it's going to help us kind of see kind of where the parameters are in the is touching code. Okay, so that's going to be puzzle 8. Puzzle 9 we're going to look at very slightly as well. The only thing I want to point out in puzzle 9 is to, again, kind of go through that puzzle solving procedure that I talked about earlier. And once you're ready to do the things, please make sure you guys do these 3 things in the order they give you guys. Again, just follow the directions given. It's going to make things a little more simpler than it actually seems to be at first. Okay, so you're really just following the directions here. Make sure you do all 3 things. Okay, and finally for number 10, again, this is more the playing sound. I forgot, let's just kind of quickly look at this. I forgot where it wanted us to play a sound. It wants us to make sound effects for at least 2 different effects for when sprites collide. I would like you guys to use playing a sound command. Let's take a look at where we could add it. It doesn't look like they actually have any of the touching conditions yet. Oh, here it goes. So they do have a touching condition. I wonder if this is actually something I already had. Yeah, sorry. So I actually already did that one. So let's take a look at it. So we could have a is touching command. Maybe let me just go back to one that I had, that way I don't have to redo everything. So here I do have the is touching command. When the frog is touching the mushroom, what do we want to happen? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to want to play a sound. So let's take a look at this. We could just go ahead and choose a sound by clicking on this arrow, and then you could look at the different options you have. I forgot which one I chose exactly. You could play it to listen to it. I think it's muted. Let me unmute it. You can play it to listen to it if you want. and then just choose whichever you want. I'll just choose this one. And then the second one is the loop, and they explains it here. The extra parameter is called loop, which could be set to true or false. If it's true, it's going to play over and over and over again. If it's false, like here, it's only going to play one time. So let's run it. We're going to hear a power down sound, and it's going to play it just one time. If I set it to true, you're going to hear it kind of replay over and over again. Okay, so that's going to be less than 10. Sorry, puzzle 10.